Yesterday, before the House committee, Attorney General Jeff Sessions told lawmakers he never lied to them about the Trump campaign's contacts with Russia. Amid new revelations, he in fact had discussions with the foreign policy aide who wanted to set up a meeting between Trump and Russian leader Vladimir Putin. In one exchange, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries challenged Sessions' need to clarify or correct previous testimony given under oath before Congress, reminding the AG about a 1999 speech he gave as a senator supporting the impeachment of then President Bill Clinton.
And in it, you acknowledged that while serving as U.S. attorney, you once prosecuted a young police officer who lied in a deposition. And in that speech, you decided to prosecute that young police officer even though he corrected his testimony. Now, you've testified under oath before the Senate Judiciary Committee in January. You subsequently corrected that testimony in a March 6 written submission and have been forced repeatedly to come back to the Senate and now the House to clarify. When explaining your vote on the Senate floor to remove Bill Clinton from office, you stated that you refused to hold a president accountable to a different standard than the young police officer who you prosecuted. Let me be clear. The Attorney General of the United States of America should not be held to a different standard than the young police officer whose life you ruined by prosecuting him for perjury.
Mr. Jeffries, nobody, not you or anyone else should be prosecuted, not me, or accused of perjury for answering the question the way I did in this hearing. I say that's not fair, Mr. Jeffries. I would say that's not fair, colleagues. That's not on any indication that I in any way participated in anything wrong.
Sessions was also peppered with questions about the Trump administration's lack of diversity, including the number of black judicial nominees to sit on the federal bench.
In terms of nominating judges to the bench, our information tells us that out of all the judges that have been nominated, I think 91% have been white males. Does that foster diversity?
I'm not aware of the numbers, but you should look for quality candidates, and I think diversity is a matter that has significance.
Well, the National Bar Association could recommend and has recommended a number of African-American and other minority attorneys who are qualified. So let me just ask you, and if you don't know the answer to these, just let me know that you'll get me the information. But how many African-Americans do you have on your senior staff?
I do not have a senior staff member at this time that's an African-American.
Out of all of...
I would note in Alabama, I participated in recommending an African-American judge, and I've had judges before, and...
We're talking about this administration, though. Of all of the U.S. attorneys that have been nominated or confirmed, how many have been African-American?
One in Alabama that I've recommended that I knew.
And I believe
he's been confirmed.
I believe it's only that one. Out of all of the special agents in charge of FBI bureaus around the country, how many are African-American?
I do not know.
He was also asked about the FBI's report on black identity extremists the Bureau claimed were a threat to law enforcement officers.
Would you consider Black Lives Matter a black identity extremist group?
I'm not able to comment on that. I have not so declared it.
So you should know that a lot of activists around the country are very concerned that we're getting ready to repeat a very sad chapter of our history, where people who are rightfully protesting what they consider to be an injustice in their community, which is their relationship with police officers, are now being targeted and labeled as extremists and are going through periods of surveillance and harassment. And so I would like to know, what is your department going to do to protect the rights of average citizens to protest if they have a concern about police officers?
This department will not unlawfully target people.
And of course, Senator Richmond, chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, also asked him about the opioid crisis and how it compares to the crack epidemic.
Your decision to reverse Eric Holder's Smart on Crime initiative goes back to the crack tough on crime, and I think you specifically said that you want the U.S. attorneys to charge and pursue the most serious, readily provable offenses and sentences. But with opioids, we're treating it as a mental health crisis. And the question becomes, from the outside looking in, is it because of who the opioid crisis is affecting as opposed to crack? Our answer to crack cocaine was mandatory minimum sentences. So the question is, how does an outside observer reconcile how we treated crack, and which led to mass incarceration, which now with the epidemic we're losing thousands and thousands of people a year, and we're treating it with hugs and kisses and treatment as opposed to tough on crime, lock them up? How do I reconcile that and not conclude that the only difference is race and income?
Well, I would say that the federal court focuses on serious offenders, not users. We talk about international drug cartels. We talk about distribution networks, serious gangs, MS-13. We focus aggressively on that. The average federal sentence in the last 3 or 4 years has dropped 19%, and the federal prison population is down 14%.
Joining us is Congressman Hakeem Jeffries from New York. Congressman, were you satisfied with what you heard yesterday from AG Jeff Sessions?
Not at all. The Attorney General has been less than truthful on multiple occasions when testifying before Congress about contacts between himself, the Trump campaign, and Russia. This is a serious issue. Despite what Donald Trump may think, our democracy was attacked by a hostile foreign power at the direction of Vladimir Putin, explicitly to place Donald Trump in the White House. 17 different intelligence agencies have drawn that conclusion. Seems to me that the American people deserve to know the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about what happened. We haven't gotten it so far.
Also, the question related to African Americans, when you listen to what he had to say about mass incarceration, about black identity extremists, as well as, of course, when it comes to judicial nominees, it's clear this is Trump administration. If you're white and you're male, that's exactly who they want to see, frankly, in the administration, plus also on the federal bench.
Absolutely correct. Jeff Sessions and the Department of Justice were completely exposed by Congressman Richmond, Congresswoman Bass, and several other members of the Congressional Black Caucus surgically on a whole host of issues as they're on their lack of engagement in terms of protecting the right to vote. His answers were inadequate. On him doubling down on the war on drugs in terms of his approach, echoing the days of the crack cocaine epidemic, notwithstanding the fact that, as Congressman Richmond pointed out, all of a sudden there's a kinder, gentler approach as it relates to the heroin epidemic, which, by the way, as you know, Roland, also tends to affect people in suburban America, white America, and rural America. The change in approach in that regard is a little bit curious, yet he still wants to target people in inner city America using a different standard. And then the complete lack of diversity at every level within the Department of Justice in terms of the United States attorneys who've been nominated, the judges who've been nominated, members of his senior staff, the FBI agents. You can't have a law enforcement structure that reflect the gorgeous mosaic of the American people, including African Americans, without having a law enforcement structure that may target people because of their lack of sensitivity, and that's one of the things that was exposed in terms of potential targeting of activists.
All right, Congressman Hakeem Jeffries, we appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Roland, thank you.
Let's go to our panel. Greg Carr, Chair of the Department of Afro-American Studies at Howard University. Liz Copeland, Founding President of the Urban Conservative Project. Spencer Overton, President of the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies. Greg, very simply, if you looked at what Jeff Sessions has to say yesterday, Trump said during the campaign, black folks, what do you get to lose? Hell of a whole lot when you listen to what he had to say yesterday.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's either he's incompetent or he's a liar. I mean, you know, one of the things that was very striking, you know, Hakeem, one of the things Brother Jeffries did was say, man, you've said you don't recall dozens of times, over 20 times. And he responded with, oh, I don't know. When Sheila Jackson Lee pressed him explicitly about this report on black identity extremists, he said, oh, I'm not familiar with that. I mean, now how can you, under sworn testimony, and every time he sticks his hand over his head with that smirk on his face, it's like, indignation is often the last refuge of scoundrels. How can you say that you don't know and you're responsible for all this?
Liz, clearly, if you're white and you're male, that's this administration that loves you dearly.
Yes, it's a really sad reflection of the reality of this administration. But Steve Bannon said it during the campaign that they weren't interested in African-American vote. They weren't interested in doing that type of outreach. So they were really going to win the election with white men. And the administration and their selection, 97% men with U.S. attorneys, 97% white, 86% men, is a reflection of this administration's commitment to those voters who put them into office.
Well, in the beginning of the Obama administration, when I was in the Justice Department, we focused on smart on crime, not because we were liberal or whatever, but because the evidence showed that by over-prosecuting folks, we were making streets less safe, right? This administration is ignoring evidence, and as a result of ideology, is moving back toward mass incarceration. I think the same thing is happening in terms of policing, in terms of putting pressure on Black Lives Matter and pulling back from really protecting citizens from rogue police officers. And also in terms of the appointments piece, there are black Republicans who can serve at the Justice Department who are more than qualified to serve. So I'm just disappointed. Justice should not be ideological.
And again, no blacks on Sessions senior staff. And then he comes up, well, there was one black U.S. attorney I recommended from Alabama. That's it? That's the best you can do?
Out of 93.
Right, Liz, real quick.
I think it's really important to note, U.S. attorneys normally become federal judges. They become senators. It's very important to get in the door that way.
Yeah, but this administration, if you're white and you're male, that's who they want.
Weekdays on TV One.
I will never lie to you.
Oh, my God.
Roland Martin.
He doesn't want to talk to us. He wants to ignore us.
Uncensored.
Hell no.
That ain't gonna cut it, boo.
Unapologetic.
No, that is fundamentally false. You are wrong.
Unfiltered.
He wants an America where we all look alike. He ain't talking about black people.
Unrelenting.
You better go work out, because you got a fight on your hands.
NewsOne Now with Roland Martin. Weekdays at 7 a.m. on TV One.